The air inside Del Monaco smelt of truffle oil, aged steak, and in my corner of the room, distinct disappointment. I sat at the head of the table, my fingers tracing the rim of a crystal water glass. I was 32 years old. Yesterday, I had been named the Chief Financial Officer of Tectonic Solutions, making me the youngest executive in the company's history, and the only woman on the board. My salary had just tripled. It was a milestone that should have been marked with champagne toasts and proud smiles. Instead, I was checking my watch. They were 40 minutes late. "Excuse me, ma'am," the waiter whispered, leaning in with practiced discretion. "Should we hold the appetizers any longer?" "Give them 5 more minutes," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "My family, traffic is terrible this time of day." It wasn't traffic. I knew exactly what it was. It was a power play. When the heavy oak doors finally swung open, my father, Arthur, led the way, looking irritated, as if my invitation were a summons to jury duty. My mother, Martha, trailed behind him, clutching her purse nervously, her eyes scanning the room not for me, but for anyone who might judge her outfit. And then there was Lucas. My 26-year-old brother, the golden boy, the future doctor, slouching in a hoodie that probably cost more than my first car, paid for, of course, by me. They didn't apologize. They pulled out chairs, scraping the legs loudly against the floor. "This place is pretentious," my father grumbled, tossing the linen napkin onto the table. "Could have just gone to the steakhouse near the house, Stella. But you always have to show off." "It's a celebration, Dad," I said quietly. "I got the promotion. The CFO position." We know," Lucas yawned, picking up the menu and whistling. "Look at these prices. Good thing Big Sis is paying, right? I'll have the Wagyu." My mother finally looked at me, her eyes watery and perpetually victimized. "Stella, you look tired. Are you eating enough? You prioritize work too much." Lucas was just telling us how hard his residency is going to be next year. He needs his strength. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. The old script. Stella acts, Lucas receives. Stella works, Lucas rests. The dinner proceeded exactly as every family gathering had for the last decade. They ordered the most expensive items on the menu, bottles of vintage Cabernet, seafood towers, desserts they took 2 bites of. I sat there, sipping my water, listening to my father drone on about how the economy was rigged against honest men like him, while my mother fawned over Lucas, cutting his steak for him as if he were a toddler. Then came the bill. Or rather, the moment before the bill. "So," Lucas said, wiping grease from his lip. "Since you're practically a millionaire now, Dad and I were talking. My car, it's embarrassing driving a Honda to the hospital. A doctor needs to project success. There's this Porsche Cayenne." I set my glass down. The sound was sharp against the table. "No." The table went silent. "Excuse me," my father asked, his voice dropping an octave. I said no. "I pay for your mortgage. I pay for Mom's credit cards. I pay Lucas's tuition, his rent, and his allowance. I am not buying a Porsche." My father's face turned a shade of purple I hadn't seen since I was 16. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You ungrateful girl. We sacrificed everything for you. We put a roof over your head so you could go out and become some corporate shark." "You didn't sacrifice," I said, my voice trembling but growing stronger. "I've been supporting this family since I was 22. Money is all you care about," my mother wailed, creating a scene. Heads turned from other tables. "You think money makes you better than us? Better than your brother? He saves lives," my father bellowed. "You just push paper. You think you're special. Let me tell you something, Stella. We tolerate you. But if we had to choose, honestly. Looking at what a cold-hearted bitch you've become." He leaned in, his eyes full of malice. "We wish you'd never been born. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. I looked at my mother, she looked away. I looked at Lucas, he was smirking, checking his phone. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack, it was the quiet click of a lock falling into place. The hurt, the desperate need for their approval, the years of trying to buy their love, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, Arctic clarity. Wish granted, I said. My voice was steady. Deadly. I raised my hand. The waiter, looking terrified, hurried over. Check, please. Split it. Split it, the waiter asked. I am paying for my water and my salad, I declared, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. These 3 people are strangers to me. They will be covering their own bill. Stella, don't be ridiculous, my father scoffed, though panic flickered in his eyes. The bill was easily over $800. He didn't have that. I pulled out my wallet, placed a $50 bill on the table, and stood up. Then, I took out the supplementary black card I had given my father for emergencies, the one he used for golf clubs and whiskey. I took a pair of shears from my purse, small grooming scissors I kept for emergencies, and cut the chip in half. Live your lives as though your daughter, Stella, never existed, I said. I turned my back on them. Behind me, I heard the chaos erupt, my father shouting, the manager being called, my mother sobbing. I walked out into the cool night air, took the first deep breath of my life, and got into my car. Driving away from Delmonico, I didn't go straight home. I drove aimlessly through the city, the neon lights blurring into streaks of color against the rain on my windshield. My mind wasn't on the road, it was traveling back in time, trying to pinpoint exactly when I became the family ATM instead of a daughter. The inequality wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a slow, dripping poison I had been drinking since childhood. I remember being 14. It was a brutal November, freezing rain lashing against the siding of our old house in Ohio. The roof had developed a leak right over the master bedroom. My father sat in his recliner, watching football, beer in hand, complaining about the drip 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 sound into the bucket. Stella, he had yelled. Get up there and tarp it. But Dad, it's slippery, I had pleaded. I was a scrawny teenager, terrified of heights. Don't be useless. I have a bad back. Go. I spent 3 hours on that roof, my fingers numb, sliding around on wet shingles, terrified I would fall and break my neck. When I finally came down, soaked to the bone and shivering, expecting maybe a good job, or a cup of hot cocoa, I found the living room empty. They had gone out for pizza. They didn't bring me back a slice. Contrast that with Lucas. Lucas was 6 years younger. The miracle baby. The heir. When Lucas was 10, he got a B+ on a spelling test. Not an A. A B+. My parents threw him a party. My father bought him a brand new gaming computer, top of the line, saying, "We have to nurture his intellect. He's going to do great things." I was a straight A student. Valedictorian. Debate team captain. When I brought home my report card with a 4.0 GPA, my mother would glance at it while folding laundry and say, "That's nice, Stella. Did you remember to take the trash out?" I learned early on that my achievements were invisible, but my utility was required. I was the shadow that kept the house running so the son, Lucas, could shine. I bought my first car at 16 with money I earned scrubbing floors at a diner after school and on weekends. It was a rusted Toyota with 200,000 miles on it. I was so proud. I drove it home, beaming. "It's an eyesore," my father said, spitting on the driveway. "Park it on the street. I don't want the neighbors thinking we're poor." 2 years later, when Lucas turned 16, a brand new Mustang appeared in the driveway with a red bow. "A future doctor needs a reliable vehicle," my father declared. "Safety first." "Where did you get the money?" I asked, knowing they had been behind on utility bills. "We took a second mortgage," my mother said defensively. It's an investment in his future. You wouldn't understand, Stella. You don't have his potential. That word. Potential. It was the weapon they used to beat me down. Lucas had potential, so he deserved the world. I had competence, so I deserved to serve. I remember sitting in my room that night, looking at my walls covered in academic awards, realizing that no matter how high I climbed, I would never be high enough for them to see me. I wasn't their child, I was their insurance policy. I was the retirement plan they hadn't bothered to save for. As I idled at a red light in the present day, a memory from Christmas 10 years ago surfaced, a memory so sharp it still drew blood. I was 22, freshly graduated, working 2 jobs. I had saved for 6 months to buy them a massive flat-screen TV and a leather recliner for Dad. I wanted to prove I was worthy. I wanted to buy their love. I wrapped everything beautifully. When they opened them, my father kicked the recliner's footrest. "It's not real leather, is it? Feels like bonded." "Oh, Stella," my mother sighed, looking at the TV. "It's too big for the room. Now we have to rearrange everything. It's such a hassle." Then Lucas handed them an envelope. Inside was a framed photo of himself wearing a borrowed stethoscope from a Halloween costume, signed, "To the best parents, from your future surgeon." My mother burst into tears. She clutched the photo to her chest. "The best gift," she sobbed. "Look, Arthur, look at our boy. This is what matters." They hung the photo in the center of the living room. The TV I bought played in the background, ignored. That was the night I should have walked away. But hope is a dangerous thing. I kept thinking, if I just earn more, if I just solve one more crisis, if I just pay off the house, then they'll look at me the way they look at him. Tonight, at Delmonico, the hope finally died. And as I turned the corner toward my apartment, I realized that grief was absent. There was only a cold, metallic taste of resolve. They wanted me to disappear. Fine. But they forgot one thing: I was the one holding the checkbook. And gravity was about to hit them very, very hard. The narrative of my life wasn't just about emotional neglect, it was a financial heist. As I entered my apartment, a sleek, modern sanctuary in Bellevue that I had bought with my own money, I couldn't help but calculate the cost of my stupidity. I walked to my home office. It was time to look at the numbers. For years, I told myself I was a good daughter. In Asian cultures, in Hispanic cultures, in many American families, taking care of your parents is what you do. It's the unwritten contract. But this wasn't care. This was predation. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheets I had mentally avoided for years. The family support folder. My mind drifted back to my early 20s. I had just landed my first junior analyst role. The pay was decent, but living in the city was expensive. I ate instant ramen 5 nights a week. I kept my thermostat at 62 degrees in the winter to save on heating. I didn't buy new clothes for 2 years. Why? Because every month the phone would ring. Stella, my mother's voice would crack, trembling with that practiced fragility. "It's your father. His blood pressure, the stress is killing him. The roof is leaking again, and the contractor wants $5,000. If we don't fix it, the mold will make us sick. Do you want us to get sick?" "I don't have 5,000, Mom," I would whisper, looking at my bank account which held barely enough for rent. "Oh. I see." A long, suffocating pause. "Well, maybe we can sell your grandmother's jewelry. Or I can stop taking my heart medication. We'll figure it out. Sorry to bother you with our problems." The guilt would wash over me like acid. "No, Mom. Don't do that. I'll put it on my credit card." I went into debt for that roof. Later, I found out they didn't hire a contractor. My father's buddy fixed it for a few $100 and a case of beer. The rest of the money. Who knows? Probably a trip to Vegas or a down payment on another toy for Lucas. And then, the biggest leech of all attached itself to my vein, Lucas's medical school. He got in, my father had screamed over the phone 4 years ago. University of Washington Med School. Our boy is going to be a doctor. I was genuinely happy for him. I thought, finally, he's doing something. But then came the kicker. Stella, the tuition is astronomical. And the books. And he can't work while he studies, it's too intense. We remortgaged the house, but it's not enough. We need you to co-sign the loans. Better yet, can you cover the living expenses? It's an investment. When he's a surgeon, he'll pay you back tenfold. I agreed. I set up a direct transfer. $2,500 a month for his rent and living expenses. Plus, I paid the semester tuition bills directly when they were forwarded to me. I looked at the spreadsheet now. Monthly transfer to Lucas, $2,500 x 48 months equals $120,000. Tuition payments, approximate $50,000 a year equals $200,000. Emergency bailouts for mom and dad, approximate $15,000 a year. I did the math. The cursor blinked. Total, over $400,000. Nearly $500,000. That was my retirement. That was the down payment on a vacation home. That was the capital for the startup I wanted to launch. I had given them my blood, sweat, and future. I remembered the time I was offered a prestigious fellowship in London. It was my dream. I called my mother, ecstatic. London, she said, her voice icy. You're going to leave us. What if something happens? What if Dad falls? Who will pay the property tax? You're just going to abandon your family for some selfish trip. It's for my career, Mom. And what about Lucas? If you leave, we can't support him. He'll have to drop out. You'd be destroying his future to chase yours. I turned down the fellowship. I stayed. I kept writing checks. Tonight, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They didn't love me, but they didn't hate me either. It was worse. To them, I was livestock. I was a dairy cow. You don't hate the cow, but you don't invite it to dinner, and you certainly don't care about its dreams. You just milk it until it runs dry, and then you turn it into burgers. My father's words echoed in the silent office, "We wish you'd never been born." It wasn't just cruelty. It was a tactical error. Because a cow doesn't have claws. But a CFO. A CFO has lawyers. A CFO understands forensic accounting. I wasn't just going to stop the payments. I was going to audit the books. I picked up my phone. It was 11:30 p.m., but I knew she would be awake. "Chloe," I said when she answered. Chloe was my best friend from Stanford, a forensic accountant who chased embezzlement for a living. "Stella. You sound distinct. What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. For the first time, everything is clear. I need a favor. I need you to help me trace some assets. And I need you to find out exactly where my brother's tuition payments have been going." "Is this about the promotion dinner?" "The dinner is over," I said, staring at the family photo on my desk, the one I was about to throw in the trash. "This is about the reckoning." The morning after the dinner, I woke up to a sensation I hadn't felt in years, absolute silence. Usually, my mornings began with a barrage of texts. "Mom, did you deposit the money?" "Lucas, need cash for textbooks ASAP." "Dad, the car is making a noise again." "Today?" "Nothing." Or so I thought. I picked up my phone. The screen was flooded with notifications, but the silence came from the fact that I didn't care. 47 missed calls. 82 text messages. I opened one from my mother. Stella, you humiliated us. Dad is having chest pains. If he has a heart attack, it's on your conscience. Call us immediately and fix this. Another from Lucas, my card got declined at the gas station. WTF. Turn it back on. I have rounds in an hour. I didn't feel the usual panic. I didn't feel the urge to rush over with an apology and a check. I felt clinical. I made a pot of coffee, black. Then, I sat down and initiated Protocol Ghost. First, the phone company. I removed myself from the family plan. I had been paying the bill for 5 lines, mine, parents, Lucas, and an iPad. I ported my number to a new carrier and cancelled the contract for the others. They would wake up to no service. Next, the locks. I owned the condo I lived in, but my mother had a key for emergencies. She often let herself in to criticize my cleaning, or borrow my expensive skincare products. I called a locksmith. By 10 a.m., my door had a smart lock that required a fingerprint. Their key was now just a piece of useless metal. Then, the big one. The bank. I walked into the downtown branch of Chase Bank. The manager, Mr. Evans, knew me well. Ms. Adams, congratulations on the CFO position, he beamed. Thank you, David. I need to make some changes to my accounts. Today. Of course. What do you need? I want to remove Arthur and Martha Adams as authorized users on all credit accounts. I want to close the joint checking account I share with my mother. And I want to put a freeze on any transfers to the account ending in 4590, my brother's account. David typed away, then paused. Ms. Adams, there are several scheduled auto transfers. The mortgage for the house in Ohio. The tuition payments. Cancel them. All of them. David looked up, over his glasses. This will likely trigger overdrafts on their end. Are you sure? I am sure. And David? If anyone with the last name Adams calls trying to access my information, I want a verbal password set up. The password is ingratitude. Walking out of the bank, the sun seemed brighter. I was light. Physically light. I had just shed 500 pounds of dead weight. I went to work. My assistant, Sarah, looked at me with concern. Stella, your mom called the front desk 3 times. She said it's an emergency. Tell security that if any of my family members show up, they are not to be let up to the executive floor. If they cause a scene, call the police. Sarah's eyes went wide. The police? Your parents. They aren't parents, Sarah. They're liabilities. Treat them as such. Around noon, Evelyn, the CEO, called me into her office. Evelyn was a woman of steel, 50 years old, formidable, and everything I wanted to be. She poured me a scotch, neat. I heard about the dinner, she said. Word travels fast in our circles. The waiter at Del Monaco probably tweeted about it. I handled it, I said, sipping the amber liquid. Good, Evelyn nodded. You know, Stella, you're a brilliant CFO because you protect this company's assets with your life. You spot risk a mile away. But you've been running your personal life like a charity for fraudsters. I know. It stops now. Be careful, Evelyn warned, leaning back in her leather chair. When you cut off a parasite, it doesn't just fall off. It tries to burrow deeper. They will get desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. Especially when they feel entitled to your blood. She was right. The silence of the morning was just the calm before the storm. By 4 p.m., the emails started coming. Not to my personal email, I had blocked them there, but to my work email. Subject, please read Stella from Lucas Adams at. You think you're so tough. You're ruining my career. I can't study if I'm worried about rent. Dad is talking about suing you for elderly neglect. Fix this or I swear I'll come down there. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the email to a new folder I created on my desktop named Evidence. Because the CFO in me knew, this wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was building a case. And I needed receipts. 3 days later, Chloe came to my apartment with a bottle of wine and a laptop thick with encryption software. You ready to go down the rabbit hole? She asked, kicking off her heels. I've been living in the rabbit hole, I replied. I'm ready to see the map. We connected her laptop to my big screen. Chloe was a genius at forensic accounting. She could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar merger. Unraveling the clumsy finances of the Addams family was child's play for her, but what she found was shocking even to me. Okay, Chloe started, clicking open a spreadsheet that looked like a crime scene board. Let's start with the tuition. She pulled up the bank records. I had been sending money to an account under Lucas's name, which I assumed he used to pay the University of Washington. Here's the first red flag, Chloe pointed to a graph. You see these withdrawals? Large cash withdrawals. ATM limits maxed out at 2 a.m. Locations, the Emerald Queen Casino, the Muckleshoot Casino, and a lot of online transfers to sites like DraftKings and BetMGM. My stomach turned. He's gambling. He's not just gambling, Stella. He's bleeding. Look at the dates. Every time you sent the rent or books money, within 48 hours, 80% of it was gone to casinos or sports betting. But the tuition, I stammered. I saw the bills. He emailed me the PDF invoices from the university. Chloe sighed and opened another window. I ran the metadata on those PDFs. They were edited in Adobe Photoshop. Badly, I might add. The fonts don't match the official university letterhead. And look here, the student ID number. It doesn't exist in the public directory. I stared at the screen. The invoices I had agonized over. The extra hours I worked to pay them. They were fake. All of them. So he hasn't been paying tuition. Stella, Chloe said softly. I called the registrar's office this morning. Pretended to be doing a background check for a rental application. There is no Lucas Addams enrolled at the University of Washington Medical School. He's not a student. The room spun. What? He was enrolled in the undergrad biology program 5 years ago, Chloe continued. He dropped out after 2 semesters on academic probation. He never even applied to med school. I stood up, walking to the window, feeling like I might vomit. 5 years. For 5 years I've been paying for a degree that doesn't exist. He bought a stethoscope. He wears scrubs around the house. Costume, Chloe said brutally. It's a con. A long con. And Mom and Dad? I asked, dreading the answer. Did they know? Chloe clicked on another tab. This is your parents' joint account. You see these transfers from Lucas's account back to them. Thousands of dollars labeled gift or help. He was kicking back money to them, I whispered. It was a conspiracy. My own family was a cartel. It gets worse, Chloe said. The house. You've been paying the mortgage directly, right? Yes. To the bank. That's fine. But look at this credit report for your father. There's a secured loan taken out 2 years ago. A massive one. $150,000. Secured by what? They don't have assets. Secured by the equity in the house. The equity you built by paying down the principal. I sank onto the sofa. They took a second mortgage. Without telling me. They forged your name on the consent form. No, the deed is in their name, so they didn't need your permission. But they took the money. $150,000 in cash. Where did it go? She traced the line. It went to pay off a massive debt to a collection agency, looks like a settlement for a lawsuit. Or a loan shark. It's murky. But the point is, the money is gone. And they are 3 months behind on that second mortgage payment. If they default, the bank takes the house. Your payments on the first mortgage are basically being thrown into a fire. I closed my eyes. I saw my mother crying about her heart condition. I saw my father puffing out his chest about Lucas's future. It was all theater. They were actors, and I was the audience who paid for the ticket with my life. They aren't just irresponsible, I said, my voice cold. They are criminals. Technically, yes, Chloe said. Fraud. Forgery on the tuition documents. Misappropriation of funds. If you wanted to, you could send them to prison. Prison. My parents. My brother. I don't want them in prison yet, I said, standing up and pouring myself a glass of wine. That's too easy. They need to be exposed. They need to feel the humiliation they tried to inflict on me. What's the plan? Chloe asked. Step 1, I said. We verify the doctor. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need pictures. If he's not in med school, where does he go every day when he leaves the house in scrubs? Chloe grinned. I can track his phone location. It's linked to the family plan you just cancelled, but the history is still there. She typed for a moment. Well, look at that. Every day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., he's not at the hospital. He's at Dave's Bar and Grill on 4th Street. And the Muckleshoot Casino. Tomorrow, I said, I'm going to pay the good doctor a visit. The Muckleshoot Casino is a depressing place at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. It smells of stale cigarette smoke, desperation, and cheap carpet cleaner. It's not Ocean's 11, it's where pension checks go to die. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. I drove my old rental car, not my usual Audi, to avoid being spotted. I parked in the back and walked into the cavernous hall of slot machines. Chloe's tracking data was precise. Lucas was here. I walked past rows of elderly people zombie staring at spinning fruits. And then, I saw him. He was sitting at a blackjack table in the high-limit section. He was wearing his costume, blue medical scrubs with UW medicine embroidered on the chest. He looked every bit the exhausted resident taking a break. Except he had a whiskey sour in one hand, and a stack of chips in the other. I stood behind a pillar, watching. Hit me, Lucas said, tapping the table. The dealer flipped a card. King. Bust. Lucas slammed his fist on the table. Rigged. This whole shoe is rigged. Calm down, Doc, the dealer said, clearly familiar with him. You want to buy back in? Yeah. Put it on the marker, Lucas muttered. My sister is sending a wire today. She's liquidating some assets for my trust fund. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. He was using my name, my hard work, to fuel his addiction, all while wearing a costume to garner sympathy. I took out my phone. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation gives them a chance to lie. Evidence gives them nowhere to hide. I recorded a video. I zoomed in on his face, the scrubs, the chips, the drink. I recorded him flirting with the cocktail waitress, bragging about surgery he had to perform later. Yeah, brain surgery, he laughed, slurring slightly. High stakes, baby. Just like this table. I filmed for 10 minutes. I got him losing another $2,000. I got him signing a marker, a credit slip from the casino. Then, I left. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the University of Washington registrar again, just to have it recorded on my end. I'm checking on a student, Lucas Adams, I said, putting it on speaker and hitting record on my second device. I'm sorry, ma'am, the clerk said. As we told the previous caller, we have no record of a Lucas Adams in the School of Medicine. We had an undergrad by that name dismissed 4 years ago. Dismissed for what? I can't release specific disciplinary records, but generally, dismissal implies academic failure or violation of the code of conduct. Thank you. I hung up. The puzzle was complete. My brother wasn't a doctor. He was a dropout, a gambler, and a liar. And my parents were his enablers. They knew. They had to know. You don't live in the same house with someone for 4 years and not notice they never study, never have homework, and come home smelling like an ashtray instead of antiseptic. They were protecting the lie because the lie was their status symbol. Having a doctor son made them better than the neighbors. Having a CFO daughter was just useful. I drove back to the city, my mind racing. I had the evidence. Now I needed the venue. But before I could plan the reveal, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. New post by Arthur Adams. I opened the app. My father, who barely knew how to use email, had written a public post. It is with a heavy heart that I share the truth about my daughter, Stella Adams, CFO of Tectonics. We raised her with values, but money has corrupted her soul. She has abandoned her sick parents and her struggling brother in our time of need. She has forgotten where she came from. Shame on you, Stella. Family is forever, not just when it's convenient. He had tagged my company. He had tagged my colleagues. He had tagged local news outlets. My blood ran cold. This was the escalation Evelyn had warned me about. They were trying to destroy my reputation to blackmail me into submission. I walked into my office building, head held high, though inside I was shaking. Sarah, my assistant, looked pale. Stella, she whispered. People are talking. There are comments on the company page. I went to my desk and opened the post. The comments were nasty. Wow, sounds like a terrible person. Corporate greed at its finest. How can you trust a CFO who cheats her own father? They wanted a war. They just declared one. I picked up the phone and dialed the company's legal department. Then I called HR. This is Stella Adams. I am being targeted by a harassment campaign involving libel and defamation. I am initiating a formal response. And I need security to be on high alert. Then I opened the evidence folder. I dragged the video of Lucas at the casino into it. I dragged the recording of the registrar. I wrote a reply to my father's post, but I didn't hit send. Not yet. A comment war is messy. I needed something definitive. I needed to nuke the narrative. But first, I had to deal with the fallout. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Carol. The family gossip. Stella, she hissed. How could you? Your mother is hysterical. She says you cut off the electricity. She's sitting in the dark. After all she did for you. She's not in the dark, Aunt Carol, I said calmly. The electricity is paid until the end of the month. She's lying. Don't you call your mother a liar. You ungrateful brat. We all know about the London trip you took. I never took it. You spend money on yourself and leave them to starve. The flying monkeys had been released. The smear campaign was in full swing. I hung up and blocked Aunt Carol. They were trying to isolate me. They wanted me to feel so alone, so shamed, that I would crawl back with my checkbook just to make the noise stop. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I don't break under pressure. I thrive in it. Sarah, I called out. Get me a meeting with the corporate PR team. And call Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson. The old estate lawyer. Yes. He was my grandmother's attorney. I have a feeling there's one more skeleton in this closet, and I'm going to find it. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. My parents realized that the shame strategy wasn't working fast enough to pay their bills. The silence from my end was driving them mad. Their desperation began to curdle into aggression. On Wednesday, they showed up at my apartment building. Security stopped them in the lobby. I watched on the camera feed as my mother threw herself on the floor, weeping loudly, screaming, "My daughter is killing me. She lives in luxury while we starve." Neighbors walked by, looking uncomfortable. It was humiliating, yes. But it also proved Evelyn right: parasites fight dirty when detached. I sent down a printed note via the concierge. It read simply, "Please leave, or I will file for a restraining order. I have video evidence of Lucas at the casino. Go home." They left, but the look on my father's face through the camera was pure hatred. On Thursday, the lawyer letters started. Not real lawyers, they couldn't afford those. These were threatening emails from legal templates found online, claiming parental support rights and elder abuse. I forwarded them all to my actual lawyer. But the real blow came Friday. I was in a board meeting, presenting the quarterly forecast. My phone buzzed in my pocket, repeatedly. Then, the conference room phone rang. Evelyn answered it. Her face tightened. "She's in a meeting." "No. That is inappropriate." She hung up. "Everything okay?" I asked, pausing my presentation. "Your brother," Evelyn said, her voice low. "He just called the main switchboard. He told the receptionist that you are embezzling company funds to support a drug habit. He said he has proof and wants to speak to the board." The room went silent. My colleagues looked at me, some with pity, some with suspicion. My face burned. This was it. They were trying to get me fired. If I lost my job, I lost my power. "I apologize," I said, standing tall. "My brother is unwell. He has a severe gambling addiction and is lashing out because I cut off his funding. I will handle this immediately." I walked out of the meeting, shaking with rage. This wasn't just family drama anymore, this was career sabotage. I went to my office and called Lucas. "You think that was smart?" I asked when he answered. "Oh, look who decided to call," Lucas laughed. He sounded manic. "Scared for your big job, Stella? Send the money. $50,000. Cash. By tonight. Or I call the local news. CFO steals from elderly parents. It's a juicy headline." "You're blackmailing me." "I'm negotiating severance," he sneered. "You owe us. You ruined my life." "I ruined your life. You're not even a doctor, Lucas. You're a dropout junkie playing dress-up." Silence on the line. Then, a dark, low voice. "You don't know what you're talking about. You better pay up. Dad's got a plan, Stella. You don't want to see what happens next." He hung up. I sat there, adrenaline coursing through my veins. They were escalating to criminal extortion. That afternoon, Mr. Henderson, the attorney, arrived at my office. He was a man of 80, sharp as a tack, wearing a tweed suit. He had been my grandmother's lawyer, the only person in the family who had ever truly loved me. "Stella," he said, sitting down. "I saw the social media posts. I heard about the trouble. It's a mess, Mr. Henderson. They are trying to destroy me. I know your parents," he sighed. "Arthur and Martha, they always felt the world owed them something. But I came here because, well, seeing this behavior, I realized I might have made a mistake years ago." "A mistake?" "I honored a request to keep a secret. A secret your grandmother asked me to keep until you were ready. But I see now that keeping it hidden has only emboldened them." He pulled a thick, yellowed file from his briefcase. "Your grandmother, God rest her soul, knew exactly who her son, your father, was. She knew he was greedy. She knew he would squander everything. She didn't leave much, did she? Just the house. That's what your parents told you, Mr. Henderson said. And that's what they told the probate court. But that wasn't the truth. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Your grandmother set up a trust. A specific living trust. The house wasn't left to Arthur. It was left to the trust. And the sole beneficiary of that trust is you, Stella. I stared at him. Me? But Mom and Dad have the deed. They took out a mortgage on it. If they have a deed, Mr. Henderson said, his eyes narrowing, then it is a forgery. Because the original deed is in my safe. He opened the file. And there was cash. A significant amount. Stocks, bonds. About $300,000 in 2015. It was meant to pay for your education and your future. I never saw a dime, I whispered. I paid for college with loans. I worked 3 jobs. I suspected as much, Mr. Henderson said grimly. Your father came to me 10 years ago, claiming he had power of attorney over you because you were mentally unstable at the time. He produced documents signed by you, authorizing him to liquidate the trust for family emergency needs. I never signed anything. I see that now, Mr. Henderson tapped the paper. The signature, it looks like Lucas's handwriting, actually. He was always good at tracing. The room spun. They hadn't just used me. They had stolen my inheritance. They had stolen the house I was paying the mortgage on. They had forged my signature to rob me of the protection my grandmother tried to give me. This wasn't just unfair. This was a felony. Grand larceny. Fraud. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and fury. If this is true, then the house they are living in is mine. Legally? Yes. They are squatters in your home. And the money they spent? That was your money. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city skyline. The tears finally came, but they were tears of rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. They threatened to sue me, I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. They threatened to call the police on me. I turned back to Mr. Henderson. Let's give them what they want. Let's involve the authorities. But not for me. What do you want to do, Stella? I want to evoke the nuclear option, I said. They are coming here on Monday to protest my office again. Lucas threatened it. I want to be ready. Ready for what? Ready to serve them, I smiled, but it was a smile that would have terrified a shark. We're going to have a family reunion. Right here in the conference room. Bring the papers, Mr. Henderson. And bring the police. The weekend passed in a blur of strategic planning. I wasn't the victim anymore, I was the prosecutor. Mr. Henderson and Chloe worked together. The picture they painted was horrifying. My grandmother had left the house and $300,000 to me. My parents, using a forged power of attorney, likely created by a shady notary friend of my dad's, had transferred the funds to their account the week after she died. They used that money to buy the Mustang for Lucas. To pay for vacations. To fund Lucas's gambling. When the cash ran out, they forged a deed transfer to put the house in their name, then took out the second mortgage. Every nice thing Lucas ever had, every steak dinner they ate, every comfort they enjoyed, it was paid for by my inheritance. And when that ran out, they enslaved me to pay for the rest. It's sick, Chloe said, looking at the documents on Sunday night. It's financial incest. They cannibalized you. And tomorrow, I said, staring at the PowerPoint presentation I had prepared, they are going to choke on it. Monday morning. The D-Day. I sent a text to Lucas. Fine. You win. Come to my office at 10 a.m. Bring Mom and Dad. We will discuss a settlement. I'll have a check ready. It was the bait. I knew they couldn't resist. At 9:55 a.m., they arrived. They walked into the lobby of Tectonics like they owned the place. My father was wearing his best suit, which I bought. My mother was wearing her pearls, which I bought. Lucas was smirking, looking triumphant. I had instructed security to let them up. They entered conference room B. It was a glass-walled room, visible to the entire office floor. Well, my father said, sitting at the head of the table. I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Stella. This whole rebellion was childish. Just give us the check, Lucas said, drumming his fingers. I have rounds to get to. Sit down, I said. I stood at the other end of the table. Before I give you anything, we need to review the terms. Terms, my mother scoffed. We are your parents. The terms are you support us. Actually, I pressed a button on the remote. The projector screen behind me lowered. The terms are determined by the law. The first slide appeared. It was a photo of Lucas at the casino, timestamped last Tuesday. Lucas froze. What is this? He stammered. This is Dr. Adams performing brain surgery at the blackjack table, I said. And this? I clicked the next slide. It was the email from the university registrar confirming he was never enrolled. You're a fraud, Lucas, I said calmly. And Mom, Dad? You knew. You've been laundering my money through his fake tuition to fund your lifestyle. My father stood up, face red. This is outrageous. We are leaving. You can't talk to us like this. Sit down, Arthur. I shouted. My voice cracked like a whip. He actually sat. I'm not done. Slide 3. The screen changed. It was a scanned image of the trust fund document signed by my grandmother. And next to it, the forged power of attorney document with my fake signature. Does this look familiar? I asked. The color drained from my mother's face. She looked like a ghost. Stella, that was theft. Mr. Henderson walked out from the adjoining room. He placed the original file on the table. Hello, Arthur. Martha, Mr. Henderson said coldly. Henderson, my father squeaked. You forged a federal document, Mr. Henderson said. You stole $300,000 from a trust. And you committed mortgage fraud by using a house you don't own as collateral. But we're family, my mother wailed. We did it for the family. For Lucas. He needed a start. You did it to me. I yelled, finally letting the emotion break through. You stole from me. You made me work myself to the bone to pay you back with my own money. You wished I was never born. Well, guess what? If I hadn't been born, you wouldn't have had anyone to steal from. Stella, please, my father's arrogance was gone, replaced by pathetic fear. We can work this out. We can pay it back. With what? I asked. You have nothing. The house is mine. The money is gone. We're your parents, my mother sobbed, reaching for my hand. You wouldn't hurt us. I pulled my hand away as if she were fire. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. But the consequences will. I looked toward the door. 2 police officers and a detective in a suit walked in. Arthur Adams, Martha Adams, Lucas Adams, the detective asked. No, Lucas backed away. No. This is a misunderstanding. We have a warrant for your arrest, the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. Charges of grand larceny, forgery, and wire fraud. The office outside the glass walls had gone silent. Everyone was watching. My staff, the board members, my assistants. They saw the entitled family being handcuffed. Stella, my mother screamed as the officer cuffed her. Stella, tell them to stop. We raised you. How can you do this? I looked her in the eye. The woman who had manipulated me for decades. The woman who valued her son's lies over my truth. You raised an ATM, Mom, I said softly. Not a daughter. And the machine is out of order. You wished I never existed, I told my father as they dragged him past me. Start getting used to it. Because where you're going, I won't be there to bail you out. Lucas was crying, begging, blaming our parents. They made me do it. It was their idea. They were led out of the room, a parade of shame. I stood there in the silence of the conference room. Mr. Henderson put a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Stella, he said. I looked at the empty chairs. The PowerPoint still glowing on the screen. No, I said, feeling a strange, new sensation. It wasn't happiness. It was freedom. It's just beginning. The silence that followed the police escorting my family out of conference room B was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the collective exhale of 50 people. I stood there staring at the empty leather chairs where my parents had just sat, where they had tried, for the last time, to exert a power over me that they no longer possessed. The PowerPoint slide was still up on the screen, projecting the damning image of the forged power of attorney. It felt like looking at the wreckage of a car crash I had just walked away from without a scratch. Evelyn, my CEO, was the first to move. She didn't say a word. She walked over to the conference table, picked up the glass of water my father had been drinking from, and dropped it into the wastebasket. The thud was final. Clean up on aisle 5, she said dryly, breaking the tension. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the office. It was the sound of my team realizing that the world hadn't ended. Stella, Evelyn turned to me, her expression softening. Take the rest of the week. That's an order. I have the quarterly projections to finish, I said automatically. It was my defense mechanism, work. Work was the only place where effort equaled reward. The projections can wait, Evelyn said firmly. You just amputated a gangrenous limb. You need to recover. I walked back to my office, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me. But unlike the shame I had felt during the social media smear campaign, these looks were different. They weren't judging me. They were looking at me with a mix of shock and respect. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't hidden. I had stood in the center of the glass bowl and fought back. Sarah, my assistant, followed me in and closed the door. She looked pale. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I let them up. I didn't know they would. You did exactly what I asked, Sarah, I said, sinking into my chair. If you hadn't let them up, the police would have had to arrest them on the sidewalk, and that would have been a spectacle. This way, the evidence was on the table. I turned my chair to face the window. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. It is a strange biological reaction to realizing you are essentially an orphan now. My parents weren't dead, but the people I thought they were, the parents I had tried so desperately to please, had never existed. They were characters played by con artists. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. It's done. The police seized their phones as evidence. The accounts are frozen. And Stella. You need to see this. She sent a link. It was a video from a bystander outside the building. It showed my father, Arthur, being guided into the back of a squad car, ducking his head to avoid the camera. My mother was weeping loudly, shouting about ungrateful children to anyone who would listen. Lucas looked like a deer in headlights, his fake doctor facade completely shattered. The video already had 10,000 views. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a wave of relief. The secret was out. The perfect family myth they had used to bludgeon me was dead. I went home to my quiet, secure apartment. For the first time in my life, I didn't check my bank account to see if I had enough to cover their emergencies. I didn't wince when the phone rang. But the silence was pierced later that evening by a call from a number I didn't recognize. A collect call from the King County Correctional Facility. You have a call from an inmate, Martha Adams. Press 1 to accept. I sat on my sofa, the phone in my hand feeling like a grenade. Part of me wanted to hang up. To never hear her voice again. But the little girl inside me, the one who spent 3 hours on a freezing roof fixing shingles, needed to hear what she had to say now that the power dynamic had flipped. I pressed 1. Stella. My mother's voice was tinny, echoing, and stripped of all its usual soft manipulation. It was jagged with panic. Stella, you have to get us out. The bail is set at $50,000 each. You have the money. Call Mr. Henderson. Tell him it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Mom, I said, my voice calm. It's a felony. We are your parents. You can't leave us in here. It's cold, Stella. There are people here. Horrible people. I'm scared. I was scared too, I said. I was scared when I couldn't pay my rent because I sent you money. I was scared when you told me you wished I hadn't been born. Do you remember that? I didn't mean it, she shrieked. I was stressed. Your father was stressed. We love you, Stella. We did everything for you. You stole my inheritance, I cut her off. You stole $300,000 that Grandma left for me. You stole my future to buy Lucas a Mustang. We invested it in the family, she cried, reverting to the same twisted logic. Lucas is the family. We are the family. What's yours is ours. That's how families work. No, I said. That's how parasites work. Stella, please, she dropped her voice to a whisper. If you don't post bail, we'll have to stay here until the arraignment. That could be weeks. Weeks. Your father, his heart. The prison has an infirmary, I said. And unlike the fictional medical school Lucas attended, they have real doctors. You monster, she hissed. The mask slipped again. You cold, heartless bitch. I should have listened to your father. We should have cut you off years ago. You did, I said. You just forgot to stop cashing the checks. I hung up. I sat there in the dark, breathing in the air of my apartment. It smelled of lavender and peace. I realized something profound in that moment. The guilt I had carried for decades, the guilt of not being enough, of not giving enough, wasn't mine. It was theirs. They had projected it onto me to keep me compliant. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to the balcony. Below, the city lights twinkled. Somewhere in that city, in a concrete cell, my family was finally facing the consequences of their actions. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. But the war wasn't over. The legal battle was just beginning. And I knew that when money is involved, people, even family, will do anything to survive. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal motions and discoveries. Mr. Henderson was ruthless. He uncovered layers of fraud that went back even further than we thought. It turned out my parents hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they had opened credit cards in my name when I was a minor. They had used my social security number to pay for utilities they defaulted on. My credit score, which I had worked so hard to build, had been carrying hidden anchors for years. But the most interesting development came from the golden child. Lucas requested a meeting. Not with me, but with the district attorney. And he wanted Mr. Henderson present. He wants to cut a deal, Mr. Henderson told me over coffee. He's claiming he was a victim of your parents' coercion. Coercion? I laughed. He was gambling away my money at the Muckleshoot. Nobody forced him to hit on a soft 17. He's willing to testify against Arthur and Martha, Mr. Henderson said. He says he has recordings. Voicemails where they discuss how to hide the inheritance from you. How to forge the deed. I felt a chill. They were eating each other. The loyalty they preached, the family is everything mantra they used to shame me, evaporated the second the handcuffs clicked. Let him talk, I said. If he wants to bury them to save his own skin, let him. It just proves everything I've ever said about his character. The arraignment hearing was the first time I saw them since the arrest. They were brought into the courtroom in orange jumpsuits. My father looked 10 years older, his arrogant posture replaced by a slump of defeat. My mother looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. I sat in the front row, next to Mr. Henderson. I wore a white suit. Sharp. Immaculate. I wanted to be the visual opposite of their chaos. When the judge read the charges, grand larceny, forgery in the first degree, identity theft, my father flinched. How does the defendant plead? The judge asked. Not guilty, my father mumbled. Then came the bail hearing. Their public defender, because they couldn't afford a private attorney without my money, argued for leniency. Your Honor, these are elderly citizens with health issues. They have a son who is a student. The son is also a co-defendant, the prosecutor pointed out dryly. And the student's status has been proven to be fraudulent. The judge turned to me. Does the victim wish to make a statement regarding bail? I stood up. My legs felt solid. Your Honor, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the courtroom. For 10 years, I have been the sole financial support for these 3 individuals. I have paid their mortgage, their bills, and their debts under the false pretense that they were struggling. In reality, they were stealing a trust fund left to me by my grandmother. They are flight risks because they have no ties to the community other than the lies they have told. They have no assets, the house they live in is legally mine. If you grant them bail, they will try to manipulate me or flee. I ask that bail be denied or set at a level commensurate with the theft. My mother gasped. Stella. How could you? The judge banged the gavel. Order. He looked at the files. Given the severity of the financial fraud and the lack of assets, bail is set at $250,000 cash for each defendant. It was a death sentence for their freedom. They didn't have $2,500, let alone $250,000. As the bailiffs led them away, my father stopped. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was 5. The man I had loved. You won, he rasped. Are you happy now? You destroyed your family for money. I didn't destroy the family, Dad, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I just turned on the lights. You destroyed it in the dark. Lucas was led out separately. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the floor, muttering to his lawyer about the plea deal. That night, the phone rang again. It wasn't the jail. It was a restricted number. Ms. Adams. A rough voice. Speaking. This is the bail bondsman. Your mother has been calling us non-stop. She says you're the cosigner. She says you're on your way with the 10% premium. I almost laughed. The delusion was clinical. She is lying, I said. I am the victim in this case. Do not call this number again. Understood. I hung up and looked at the audience, my imaginary audience, the people who would one day hear this story. If you were me, sitting on that couch, knowing your parents were sleeping on a metal cot, knowing they were cold and scared, would you have paid? It's a question that haunts you. Society tells us to forgive. Preachers tell us to honor our parents. But what is the price of honor? Is it your dignity? Your future? Your sanity? I decided that night that forgiveness didn't mean fixing their mess. Forgiveness meant letting go of the hope that they would ever be different. I forgave them for being broken people, but I refused to let their broken shards cut me anymore. I went to sleep that night, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of drowning. 3 months later. The legal gears ground to a halt. Lucas's testimony was the nail in the coffin. He provided the district attorney with the smoking gun, a notebook my mother kept where she tracked their spending of my inheritance. It was detailed. Trip to Cabo $4,000, Stella's fund. Lucas gambling debt $12,000, Stella's fund. It was grotesque. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Arthur and Martha pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have exposed even more humiliating details. The sentencing was short. Arthur, 5 years in state prison for grand larceny and fraud. Martha, 3 years in state prison. Lucas, 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service, thanks to his plea deal, plus mandatory addiction counseling. As the judge read the sentences, I felt nothing. No joy. No sorrow. Just a flat sense of completion. Like closing a book you didn't enjoy reading, but had to finish for a class. But the real emotional climax wasn't in the courtroom. It was the house. Because the deed was proven to be forged, the house reverted to the trust. To me. The bank that held the illegal second mortgage tried to fight it, but Mr. Henderson was brilliant. He proved the bank had failed in its due diligence to verify the identity of the signer. The lien was dissolved. The house was mine. I had to go back. I had to clear it out to sell it. I drove to the old neighborhood on a gray Tuesday. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The lawn was overgrown. The welcome mat was faded. I unlocked the door with the key the police had given me. The smell hit me instantly, a mix of old coffee, dust, and my father's cheap cologne. It was the smell of stagnation. I walked through the living room. The leather recliner I had bought them was covered in stains. The massive TV was gone, probably sold by Lucas for gambling money before the arrest. I went to Lucas's room. It was a shrine to a boy king. Trophies on the shelves, participation trophies, mostly. Expensive clothes thrown on the floor. Video game consoles. It looked like a teenager's room, not the room of a 26-year-old man. Then, I walked to my room. Or what used to be my room. It was a storage unit. Boxes of old Christmas decorations were piled on my bed. My desk, where I had studied for hours to get into Stanford, was covered in junk mail and piles of unpaid bills. My debate trophies were gone. Where are they? I whispered to the empty room. I started digging through the closet. I found a box labeled Stella's stuff. I opened it. Inside, there were no photo albums. No keepsakes. Just tax forms. My old pay stubs that they had kept. Copies of the checks I had sent them. They hadn't kept memories of me. They had kept financial records. I sat on the floor of that dusty room and cried. Not for them, but for the little girl who lived here. The girl who thought that if she just got one more A, if she just made one more dollar, they would clear the boxes off her bed and let her sleep. I hired a junk removal crew the next day. Everything, the foreman asked, looking at the house full of furniture. Everything, I said. The furniture, the clothes, the dishes. I want it all gone. Except for one thing. I walked to the living room wall and took down the framed photo of Lucas in his stethoscope. The future surgeon. I took it out to the driveway. I didn't smash it. That would be too dramatic. I simply dropped it into the trash bin where the crew was tossing bag after bag of garbage. Trash, I said. 2 weeks later, the house was empty. Just bare walls and carpet. I stood in the living room one last time. It echoed. Goodbye, I said. I sold the house to a young couple who were expecting their first child. They were so excited. They talked about painting the nursery yellow. They talked about the big backyard. I signed the papers and handed over the keys. I used the proceeds from the sale to set up a real scholarship fund at the University of Washington. A scholarship for students who had been abandoned by their families. Students who had to work 3 jobs to survive. I named it the Stella Adams Resilience Fund. I didn't name it after my grandmother. I named it after myself. Because I was the one who survived. 1 year later. Thanksgiving. The air in my apartment was filled with the smell of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, and laughter. Real laughter. Not the jagged, sarcastic bickering of my childhood. I was in the kitchen, basting the bird. Chloe was at the counter, chopping pecans for a pie and recounting a bad date she had last week. So he asks me, Chloe said, waving the knife, do you think fraud is really a crime? Or just creative accounting? And I'm like, check please. We both burst out laughing. The doorbell rang. It was Mr. Henderson. He was 81 now, moving a bit slower, but his eyes were still bright. He held a bottle of vintage champagne. For the hostess, he bowed. Mr. Henderson, you spoil me, I said, kissing him on the cheek. Someone has to, he winked. Since you're too busy conquering the corporate world. Evelyn arrived next, bringing her wife and a massive bouquet of autumn flowers. And then Sarah, my assistant, and a few other friends from my new life. We sat around the table. It was full. There was no tension. No one was calculating how much the wine cost. No one was waiting for a handout. We went around the table to say what we were thankful for. I'm thankful for forensic accounting, Chloe toasted, earning a laugh. I'm thankful for retirement, Mr. Henderson said. When it came to my turn, I looked around the table. I looked at these people. None of them shared my DNA. None of them had known me when I was a child. But they knew me now. They respected me. They loved me not for what I could provide, but for who I was. I'm thankful, I started, my voice choking up slightly for the truth. I raised my glass. And I'm thankful for the family I chose. You guys saved me. To chosen family. Evelyn cheered. We ate. We drank. We told stories. Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. My phone buzzed. I checked it. It was an email notification. The sender was blocked, so it went to spam, but the preview was visible. From Lucas Adams, via prison email system, subject, parole hearing preview, hey Stella. Look, I know things are bad. But my parole hearing is coming up in 6 months. If you wrote a letter, just a character reference, saying I'm not a bad guy, maybe they'd let me out early. Mom is not doing well. Dad is. I looked at the words. The audacity was breathtaking. Even from prison, even after everything, they still reached out with that familiar hand, palm up, asking, taking. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the urge to reply and scream at him. I simply pressed delete forever. Then I went into my settings and updated my spam filters. I looked out at the city. The rain had stopped and the moon was breaking through the clouds. I was 33 years old. I was single. I was wealthy. I was free. My parents had wished I was never born because my existence inconvenienced their greed. But as I sat there breathing in the crisp November air, I made a wish of my own. I wished them clarity. I wished them the ability to sit in the silence of their cells and finally, truly, see themselves. But mostly, I wished myself a long, happy life. A life where no is a complete sentence. A life where love is a gift, not a transaction. I stood up, washed my teacup, and turned off the lights. The shadows of the past were gone. The house was clean. Thank you for listening to my story until the very end. Stay strong. Stay smart. And never let anyone make you wish you weren't born.